last historical context I'd like to talk about is Peter Senge, a learning organization. Professor Senge, he's the author of the fifth discipline, The Art and Practice of the Learning Organization. And one of his premises is that systems thinking is a discipline for seeing wholes rather than parts, for seeing patterns of change rather than just a snapshot, a picture, and for seeing subtle interconnections that gives living systems their unique character. As we keep going with that, I think this piece adds it in as to why today's systems thinking is needed more than ever, because we're becoming overwhelmed by complexity and volume of data. For the first time in history, humankind has the capacity to create far more information than anyone can absorb, to foster for greater interdependency than anyone can imagine, and to accelerate change far faster than anyone's ability to keep pace. I think that's so true. We have so much data, so much information is available to us. It's how do we process it? So I think that's where the systems approach becomes very relevant today. And within the organization, Senge refers to it as a learning organization is an organization that is continuing to expand its capacity. Peter Senge, a quote from him is, "A learning organization is an organization that is continually expanding its capacity to create its future." So if we think of that, I'd like you to think about that in context of the disruptors, which we talked about in our macro overview. And I think when he said this, he was still a prophet well before his time, because today we have so much more. And disruptors change the world so quickly, and organizations need to adapt. His simple model is that you have a learning organization, and there's about 5 components that are part of it. The systems thinking part, the building shared value, the mental models, personal mastery, and team learning. So each one of these is a component of a learning organization. So let's take a look at a couple of them. Let's first define, when we talk about systems thinking, what do we mean? A system is a group of interrelated parts, activities, working together for a single purpose. A subsystem is a smaller component of a system. Open system interacts with the environment and transfers inputs into outputs. So if we keep looking at this, what we can see, an open system interacts with the environment and transfers inputs into outputs. So a sample of this is here's inputs into a process that's from suppliers, and within the organization there are a number of subsystems. That can be the purchasing and inventory, marketing, sales and distribution, operation and service, accounting, information and technology, which all create output for the customer, So this is all the subsystems. Together this is one big system. So what we tend to do in management today, we've done this for time immemorial, and both business and human, we tend to focus on snapshots of isolated parts of the system. This part isn't working. And we wonder why our deepest problems never get solved. So the first thing is acknowledging that there's an interrelated nature of system. Giving up belief that the world comprises separate unrelated forces. All the forces together in the universe are integrated. Recognizes the interdependencies and the very complex structures relating to a business process. Understand how things influence one another within a whole. Okay, it's not just one piece. It's how does it all work together. We can look at that as the educational component. And sometimes you can see it here at GENESEO, is that we're a system. And sometimes one part of the system works well and the other doesn't. But it's all related to one because we have a common purpose, a common goal. And that leads us to the next. So that's the system thinking definitions. Then building shared vision. Oh, no. When we keep looking at systems, there is certain characteristics of complex systems. Then there's principles of practice for working on complex issues. So let's take a look at these. Context matters. It can almost often make or break initiative. Okay. Pay particular attention to contextual factors. Seek to understand, describe, and respond to changes as they occur. Connections. Relationships between entities are equally, if not more important than the entities themselves. Everything is connected in a complex system. Events in one part of the system affect all or some of the other parts. We can look at that as CIT. Without CIT running efficiently, we wouldn't be able to deliver this program. When you're working on a complex industry, you need to understand, describe, and work on the influence of the nature of the relationships and interdependencies within the system. What is the interrelationship? Understand and respond to the whole of the system, including components and connections. And you're going to oftentimes, you would describe this and create flow charts, describe organizational charts, process flow charts, so that we can understand. Patterns. Cause and effect is not linear, predictable, or one-directional. It's multidimensional. It's an iterative process. You go through this, and this. And patterns start to emerge from several different perspectives, and today within a system, they operate independently of each other or autonomously. So how do you work with that? Understand, describe, and respond to the nonlinear and multidirectional relationships between an initiative and its intended and unintended outcomes. Because sometimes we have outcomes that we hope for, and then other times we have unintended outcomes that is a result of that. And some of the greatest inventions in the world were the unintended consequences of a system gone one way or another. Perspectives. You just can't look at it from one perspective. Complex problems cannot be solved by any one actor, one person. Is that we have to look at different perspectives, and each one of you and I bring a perspective. This perspective is going to be based on our experiences, whether that be the educational experiences that we've had, the work experiences, the life experiences, our demographics, our history, which we're going to talk about in week number 3 and 4. We're going to talk about these personal attributes that come into play in an organization. But just not one person solving it. It's bringing together everybody and looking at how do these subsystems come together to form a system. And how do we get the systems thinking in our head so that when we go to make something run faster, better, smarter, that we can do that with an appropriate context. And that's the first part that we had here. But we all bring different perspectives. How do we include all of that? So that's systems thinking, part of a learning organization. The next thing we're going to do is building on shared vision. And shared vision is fairly simple. It's what you and other members want to create or accomplish as part of the organization. People have a purpose in it and added commitment to a group of sharing images of the future. What will life be like in the future? Okay? I think that becomes, we all need to have the same vision, the same goal. But a vision is what we want to see in the future happen as a result of what. If we keep coming along that same direction, the practice of shared vision involves the skills of unearthing pictures of the future. Picture what the future will be like, that people can get behind. It's rather than compliance. In mastering this discipline, leaders learn that counterproductiveness is trying to dictate a vision, no matter how heartfelt. So a senior officer in the company says, we want to do this. And oftentimes it sounds very good, but it's not something that the employees have bought into, nor is it a shared vision. It's just a slogan that you've already heard about, but it's how do we collectively come together and we agree on this is what the future will look like. Okay? And I've seen many a times that we start a program, we want to, a lot of it has been within the cost. We will reduce costs. We'll be environmentally smart, and we won't make copies of paper unless it's necessary. So at the bank at one point, we said, this is going to save us a lot of money. It'll be really green. And for like 3 months, we measured how much less paper did we use. Well, that it was not a collective vision. None of us knew what, really, we did it because we were told to do it. Did we reduce the amount of paper we used? Absolutely. But we didn't have that shared vision. And today, visions are becoming more and more important so that we could see what is actually going on. Let me just share 2 with you right now. Shared vision, to summarize, it's a future picture, okay? It's a shared vision. What do we want to create? And it really is about we, that sense of commonality, that focus on the future. So then we come back, we've looked at systems thinking, building shared vision. We saw an example of the shared vision. So now let's come on to mental models. And a mental model, our mind has different structures that drive our cognitive processes, how we think. These structures help us make sense of the world. Okay, these structures. And we have change in mental models. So I think when we talk about mental models, we're going to talk a little bit more about them, but it's awareness of our own assumptions, our concepts and beliefs, and being able to share them and ready to revise assumptions if warranted. Sometimes we need to unlearn things. So the first step is really to become aware of what assumptions, concepts, and beliefs we have. And let's just take a look at this. We have the ladder of inference. And if you start on, this is a loop. So if you start down here, we have observable data and experiences. Okay? What are we seeing? Okay? Then you take data from what you've observed. Then you add meaning, cultural and personal meaning. Then you make assumptions based on the meanings. I add it. Then you draw conclusions. Then I adapt the beliefs about work, and then I take actions based on my beliefs. So if you think about this ladder of inference, we start with data, something we observed something. Then we select a piece of data. And then you add a meaning. Was this good? Was this bad? Based on a series of assumptions. Then you draw conclusions. You adopt the belief about the world, about work, and then you take actions. So this loop is that our beliefs attract what data we select the next time. And it's sort of a process that we're going through. But think about these as a thought process. We observe, we select certain things, we add meaning based on our experiences, we make certain assumptions, lead to draw conclusions, and then they adopt the beliefs. And then you take actions based on them. So we'll keep looking at this when we move to the personal side, but this becomes important because this is how people are learning. And the iceberg model is oftentimes a way of explaining things. So we look at events, patterns, trends, structures, mental models, and we start out with events, top of the iceberg. This is what we see above the surface. What just happened? Okay? What's been happening? What are the common forces at play? What are the trends? How do processes in organization impact? How does our thinking allow this to persist? So systems thinking looks beneath the surface at the patterns, trends, structure, and systems at play. So we start with, this is what just happened. We look at events, but then we have to look back and say, what's been happening? Why? What are these common forces at play? What are the trends? How do processes in organization impact? How does the thinking allow this to persist? So this is sort of our iceberg model of getting to mental models. It's how we think. So let me give you an example on this. The event, I rode my bicycle to school today. What's the pattern of behavior? I ride my bicycle, walk, or ride the bus most days. The pattern, most days. Systemic structure. Bike lanes and racks, bike paths, bike repair services, shared bike services, bike carriers on bus. All part of the structure around that. The mental model is concern for my health and the environment, saving money, bike racks. So this is the mental model, but these are all connected. So we've looked at systems learning organization as a systems thinking, shared vision, mental model. Next piece is personal mastery. And that is from our personal side. We continue to clarify and deepen our own personal vision, which we will do in the future, next week. Develop an objective view of reality. What is reality? Clarify what's important. Not everything is important. Understand the role in their role in the organization. What's your role as a student when you're working? What's your role? So understand your roles. Draw motivation from gaps, problems. So we've looked at systems thinking, building shared vision, mental models, personal mastery. The last one is team learning. And team learning, and I think if you stop for a second and look back, there's a common threads that are going between all of these. In the long run, the only sustainable competitive advantage is your organization's ability to learn faster than the competition. Okay? Very important. Communication and collaboration between employees align thinking and energies of employees. And so instead of having work opposite each other, work going forward. Collective learning is greater than the sum of the parts. So the more we can learn as an organization, we'll be able to move forward. And our competitive advantage going forward would really be how fast can we learn compared to the competition. Can they do something faster and better than us? So when you think about some of the things in this chart here, this is a little busy place, but what does it feel like in a learning organization? Confidence can achieve the results. People doing what they care about. Shared intent, aspiration, spirit, and having fun. That's a learning organization. But I'd suggest too, it's also very much what Dr. Deming was saying in constancy of purpose. Curious organization, eager to know and understand, learning together, deep and insightful conversations. Some of us got to actually slow down to have an in-depth conversation. So think about this for a second, and we'll see this one again. So think about it. If you go to a party and there's 30 people there, how many people will you talk to? Just keep that in your mind. Okay. Eager to know. Generally, desiring to make wise choices and decisions. I think we want to do this as human beings, but we really want to, in a learning organization, empowers people to do that. Orientated to structure and design, able to reconfigure quickly. And we're seeing it today that project teams come together throughout the organization to solve a problem. Aware of the widespread strategic thinking. You might have heard about strategic planning, but my experience with strategic planning is you get a consultant to come in. They study it for 3-4 weeks, and then they come up with this grand plan, this vision, this process, and it's 100 pages long, and it sits on a shelf. We can't do anything with it. I prefer to say strategic thinking. How are we thinking for the future? And then you need to align the processes and structures to achieve that vision. So we look at it here it's the organization which encourages learning, which drives organizational learning, which drives individual learning, and learning is valued by the individual. So that's what it's like in a learning organization. And we can see it. I think this is a good picture here too, is if we have things aligned, we're all going in the same direction, okay, versus a misalignment. I used to coach like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old soccer team. And if you've ever played soccer or something like that, of course the kids all run towards the ball. Some of them will run in the opposite direction, some will run to the sidelines, and they run all over. So that's wasted energy. And one of the things I focused on is how can I get them aligned to run in straight lines instead of just to chase the ball randomly around. So in an organization that doesn't have that clear alignment, that everything isn't lined up, what you have is wasted energy. But wasted energy is costly, okay? And doesn't create satisfaction amongst employees. I will tell you that I'm most frustrated at times here and in my past history where somebody else is going in a totally different direction than I think we're going. Okay? It's frustrating. And people want to know where we're going. You want to see it align because we want to do great things. So this is an alignment of energy produces a much efficient but a happier workforce. So as we summarize this up with system thinking, interdependence among all functions working together as a whole system. Personal mastery, individual commitment to the process of learning. Learning about ourselves, learning about life, learning about systems. Team learning, accumulation of individual learning shared together to others to benefit. Mental models, unlearn unwanted values, learn new and applicable values. And this is going to be the bulk when we get to next week. And the shared vision is owned by all levels, creating focus and energy for learning. So that's Peter Senge, a learning organization. And that is now summarized. We've taken a fairly good survey of key management practices that have evolved over time. There's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of organizational behavioral specialists who've written books, who've studied organizations, who've run organizations. But one of the key things we think that we see that I want to keep out of this is constancy of purpose. What are we trying to do? The process, 85% is process, 15% is the employee. But yet we as management have to select and train the very best people to work in the organization. And we want to look at it from a system perspective and say, how do all of our systems interconnect? So that's a brief history of organizational behavior over the past couple hundred years. If you have any questions, let me know.